会有回应的嘛。
I'm very happy to have a Bible study and to have Sister Ku with us because she's very active participant.
不是，都会有 interaction。
Oh, okay, and there's an interaction with
然后
her.
今天晚上也一样嘛，查经。所以
So tonight it'll be the same.
好，那我们从现在开始，我想说这次来这里，因为常来嘛，所以讲一个系列，就讲那个迢迢旷野路。
Since I come here very often, so I like to share with you a series of sermons. And today the topic is the desert road far away starting point.
这条路很长，
So this road is very long,
就是旷野路。
and it's the desert road.
好，那这个是这条路哈，是个人的，
And this road is a personal one,
也是群体的。
and it's also a collective one.
从古一直到现在，
And it starts from ancient times until the present.
这里年纪比较大的，哇，那他最大了，90几岁，那个96
So the
哈。
oldest member here is Sister Lynn, who is 96.
那你想你的人生的路是怎么样的一条路？
So can you imagine or describe the road of your the path of your life or the road of your life?
阿三哥可以替他回答。
Oh, what kind of road has she traveled? Maybe Uncle Sam can speak on her behalf.
他的感触是怎么样？啊？哦，迢迢快，那你也真贴心了。
So Uncle Sam describes Sister Lynn's road as the desert road far away.
只是娘你的路呢？
How about the Sister Ku? How about your road?
你已经够长了，比我长啊！你短了我怎么办？你也好心一点嘛。梁弟兄呢？
How about Brother Liang?
梁叔叔，
Uncle
你
Liang?
人生到现在是什么路？
Up to now, how would you describe the road of your life?
幸福的路呢？荆棘路呢？
Is it
阳关道呢？独木桥呢？
Is it a happy road or a road filled with thorns?
好，我们每个人都有自己该走的路。
We each have a road that we have to walk on.
从圣经来讲，哈，
From the Bible's perspective,
你看创世纪的记载跟出埃及记，就是摩西五经里面，它分两个大，以这个路来讲，分两大路。
from the 5 books of Moses, as can be found in the Genesis and Exodus, we see that there are 2 main roads.
创世纪是个人的单行道，每个人走一条路。
In the book of Genesis, the road is a personal one. It's a one-way road. Everyone has their own road.
你想哈，那个亚伯拉罕的路，哦，他一生你把它回想一下，我们现在不以前有讲过，好像哈，我都有记录了。要不然以撒也有讲过，雅各有没有？你这从雅各还讲了好久啊，不能又重复嘛，是不是？
So I remember I've spoken about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob before.
那约瑟也讲了，约瑟哭了，从头哭到尾啊，哭到50章啊。
I also share with you about Joseph. He started crying all the way to the end, chapter 50.
你看他们每个人都是自己走出一条路。
So for each one of them, they each walked their own path or road.
刚刚讲那句话其实是错的，
So what I just said earlier was not correct.
对不对？我们都说你走出一条路来，对不对？
So we tend to say that we make a path for ourselves.
其实呢，神已经为你预备一条路了。
But in reality, it's God who has pre-planned or prepared a path or a road for each of us.
看你规矩不规矩走。
So it depends only on whether you choose to walk properly on this road.
你看亚伯兰、以撒、雅各哈，那约瑟
So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph,
从亚伯兰开始，
and it begins with Abraham.
神选召他之后，
After God called Abraham,
他有没有路可走？
did Abraham had a path that he could walk on?
就是没有，
Sister Koo? No.
因为他不晓往哪里去，哪里有路走。
Because he didn't know where to go, so there was no road ahead of him.
所以希伯来书的作者11章跟我们讲哈，
So the author of Hebrews in chapter 11, he tells us
他们被神选召的时候，
that when they were called by God,
他们是不知道往哪里去的，
they didn't know their destination.
他们是遵命出去
So they simply went in obedience
就走了，
and they started their journey.
是不是自己走出一条路，
So is it right to say that they created a path for themselves?
有一个目标，
They had a goal,
往将来要得为业的地方去。
which
第8
is
节哈，
in
11章8节，
Hebrews 11, verse 8.
但是出8节，
Okay, they went out not knowing, they obeyed when they were called to go out to the place.
然后呢，出去的时候还不知道往哪里去呢。
And when they went out, they do not know where, he did not know where he was going.
你不知道往哪里去，怎么走出一条路来啊？
So if you do not know where you are going, how can you make a path or a road for yourself?
这个是对我们属灵的神选召人来讲，这是人生的开始。
So to those of us who have been spiritually called by God, this is the beginning of our journey or of our lives.
你跟耶稣是先怎么舍己？所谓舍己，我们也知道，就是否定自己。你否定自己，你还有路走啊。
So if we follow according to what the Lord tells us, which is to deny ourselves, so if you do that, can you create a path then for yourselves?
所以这是前4代我们不再重复了。你看亚伯兰、以撒、雅各、约瑟，他们走的路啊，但是都是神同在的。
So we won't talk about the first 4 characters: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. They had their own roads to travel, but God was always with them.
看起来是他们走的路，
So it seemed that it was a road that they traveled on.
其实是神跟他们同走的那条路。
But in reality, God was walking with them on the road.
好，那我们来看诗篇，我们很熟的诗篇90篇。
Now let's turn to a familiar psalm, Psalm 90.
这里是讲人生很透彻的一个诗篇。
And this psalm covers very thoroughly about a life.
第1节
Verse 1,
神是世世代代做我们的居所。
God has been our dwelling place in all generations.
对亚伯兰这样子，对那个以诺啊，你是不是以诺？挪亚也是一样的。
So to Abraham and to Noah, it's also the same.
好，那个哈拿也一样哈。
The same to Hannah.
好，那我们看第2节，
Now let's read verse 2.
就是诸山未曾那个生出，地世界你未曾造，从亘古到永远，你是神啊。
So before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God.
我们看第3节，
Now let's read verse 3. You turn man to destruction and say, Return, O children of men.
你使人归于尘土，说你们世人要归回神啊。
So we have to return to God.
这是属神的人的人生路，
So this is the path of those who belong to God.
跟这个属神的人的就是相对的，或是旁边的比赛。另外，他们有人生路哦。
So on the other hand, besides the people who belong to God, the other people who are beside the people of God, they also have their own path or a road to travel on.
你看创世纪的那个家谱，
If we look at the genealogy in the book of Genesis,
平行的
it's parallel.
属神的一支
So those who belong to God is one branch.
那另外的属于那个就是人的儿子，也就是那个该隐的后代， 他们也是一支，他们都有记载哦。你不要以为说他们就没有记载，也有。
And those who belong to the Son of Man, which is the descendants of Cain, they have their own branch. They are also recorded in the Bible.
亚伯拉罕的后代有记载，但是亚伯拉罕他们的兄弟的后代也有记载哦。
So the descendants of Abraham's, the genealogy were recorded in the Bible, but the genealogy of the siblings of Abraham were also recorded.
那个以撒的后代有记载。
And the descendants of Isaac were recorded.
以撒这相对的叫以斯玛利也有啊。
And the opposite of Isaac is, or the what? 相对是什么? Oh, the counterpart of Isaac is Ishmael, and Ishmael's genealogy is recorded.
雅各的相对就是以东，就是那个吃红豆汤的，那做红豆汤的谁？
So the counterpart of Jacob is Edom, Esau, and
也是他们的后代也是都记载。
so his descendants were also recorded in the Bible.
好，那他们呢是神任凭，他们也是做出很多的事情来。
So they did many things, and God had allowed them to continue in what they're doing.
所以，我们如果真的你是属神的人，
So if you truly are people who belong to God,
神已经给你一个路了。
and God had would have already prepared a path or a road for you.
我们来看那个耶利米书，
Now let's turn to the book of Jeremiah.
耶利米书第3，
Jeremiah
我们来看第6章，
chapter 6,
6章16节。
verse 16. Okay, Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16.
好，
Thus says the Lord, stand in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths, where the good way is, and walk in it. Then you will find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it.
好，接下来你就晓得，你不走古道，那你就没有安息了。
So we know that if we choose not to walk on the old paths, then we will not have rest.
这里告诉我们，你站在路上查看。
So this verse tells us that you are standing in the ways and seeing.
你要走什么路？
So what kind of road you should take?
现在应该是走现代路啊，修得好的嘛。那古代路不好走。
So today we all would choose to walk on the latest, the modern road, and not choose to walk in the old paths. It's not comfortable to walk on old paths.
在耶利米的时代，
During the times of Jeremiah,
当时说要走古道，
so at that time they were encouraged to walk on the old paths.
那我们现在呢，
But how about us today?
也是古道。
Yes, we still walk on the old paths.
其实这条路就是神为选民所开出来的路，从古一直会走到你的孙子，走到你的孙子的孙子。
So this
只要天地不会去，属神的人就是这条路。
So this old paths is the road that God had prepared for his chosen ones from the very beginning of time to the end of time for you as well as your future generations.
然后呢，那个出埃及记之后，
And after the book of Exodus,
就不是一个人走一条路了。
it no longer a road for a single person.
前面创世纪是4代人哈，一个接一个。其实这个路其实也是我们该走的路，看你哪一种人走哪种路，都是神给我们走的。以个人来讲哈，
So in the book of Genesis, there are 4 characters, and they each have their roads. And so we each will have our own road based on what kind of character we're more closer with.
他们一开始都是神拣选，
So in the very beginning, they were chosen. They were each chosen by God.
亚伯拉罕对不对？
Abraham,
拣选的应许的，
he was chosen as by promise.
以撒也是啊，神应许的。
With Isaac, he was promised of God.
在这之前，亚伯拉罕等了半死啊，并且他也想说不要了，就那么麻烦了。他本来想说仆人就可以，以斯玛利就可以，对不对？
So before Isaac, Abraham had waited for a long time. He started by thinking that, oh, it's okay, I just have the servant and then have Ishmael as my successor.
但神一定要就是这个
But God had determined that he wants this particular one.
应许的，
It's the promised one.
雅各一样啊，
Likewise with Jacob.
还没生下来，神就喜欢雅各了，你没有办法。
Before he was born, God already liked or preferred Jacob, so you have no choice about it.
他们有一个共同的起点，
So they both had a similar starting point,
就是神所拣选的。
which is that they both were the chosen ones of God.
我们每个人都这样子哦，
So the same with all of us.
你被呼召，
You have been called.
就是所谓呼召，你听到福音呢，无论谁跟你讲的咯。
So being called means that you hear the gospel regardless who preaches the gospel to
你
you.
受洗了，
And then you are
成为
baptized
神的儿女了，
and you become the children of God.
你个人就开始走路了。
Then you personally start your own journey.
那到最后终点要一致。
And in the end, your destination must all be the same.
你看前三，我们来看创世纪25章嘛，哈，
Let's read Genesis chapter 25.
25章第7节、第8节。
Genesis chapter 25 verses 7 and 8.
好，你念一下。
Okay, Genesis 25 verse 7.
念完你就把它存到你的头脑的电脑里面。
So after you read these two verses, please put it in the computer in your brain.
那等一下，这个因为查经嘛，那个古执事娘就跟我们比较一下。
Then, because this is a Bible study, so later I asked Sister Koo to make a comparison for us.
好，来，请念咯。
Okay, verse 7, let's read. This is the sum of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 175 years. Verse 8. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people.
好，那我们再看35章第28节。
Now let's read in jump to Genesis 35, verse
28节、
28
29节，
and
上半就好。
29.
好，
Just the first part. Okay. Verse 28. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. 29. So Isaac breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people, being old and full of days.
好，那我们再看那个49章，
Now let's read Genesis chapter 49,
我们看第33节。
verse 33. Verse 33. And when Jacob had finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people.
好，再看47章的28节，补一下。
And then we'll complement this verse with chapter 47, verse
20，就是28节。
28. Verse 28. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years.
好，我们看那个创世纪的
Now
50章，
Let's read again Genesis chapter 50,
那第26节。
verse 26. Verse 26. So Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt.
好，那个你把它这4个人的终结，你把它比较一下。
So if you try to compare the end of all these four characters,
有2个共同的，
and you will find that they have all
在
two
叙述啊。
similarities.
都是说他们活了几岁，活到几岁，对
So
不对？
in terms of their age, so they both is recorded as their age, how long they lived.
越活越少啊。
And you see that as the character progresses, they live shorter lives.
哎，好了，那一定是活到几岁？他们但是个人是不一样的，
So each
几岁
one
不一样，
has a lifespan, but their length is different.
但是前3代他们最后都一致，什么样？对，
But the
归
first
到列祖。
So the first 3 generations are similar in that they all return to their fathers. Huh? They're gathered to their people.
其实原文是到他的民那里去了，聚集到他的属于他们的人的地方去。
Yeah. So in the original text, it means that they were gathered to their people, their own people.
到最后是一致的啦。
So in the end, everything was the same.
不管你在世上你是轰轰烈烈的宰相，或是那个跑东跑西的跑遍东西南北的这雅各，都到最后都一致的。
So regardless how you lived your life, whether you were a powerful governor or someone who just traveled everywhere like Jacob, your end is the same.
所以在教会里面我常常想一个台湾人讲的说，不要太台湾人是说相遇得到，这是不好的话。相遇，有一天会相遇了，修度也丢了。
Okay, so there's a Taiwanese saying that if someone tells you that one day we'll meet again, so that's not a very good a phrase to tell someone.
就是一般都是两个人吵架嘛。
So this phrase would be shared when two people are fighting.
这个很强啊。
So this one party is very strong.
这个弱了嘛。
Then the other party is weaker.
他讲就是没办法他嘛。
Then the weaker party cannot win over the other stronger one.
他就要跑了，他跑了。
So the weaker party would try to run away.
跑之前就丢下一句话了。
But before the weaker or losing party runs away, he will throw this phrase.
你现在生气哈。
Okay, now you are so stuck up.
我现在拿你没办法。
And I can't handle you now.
修度也对吧？以后让我发达起来，让我厉害起来，我修理你。
But in the future, once I get prosperous, I will come and fix you.
那在教会呢？
How about in church?
如果你对人太凶
，If you are too fierce to someone,
或是没理啊，
or too rude,
你自己要想修度也丢，有一天会在，除非你不得救了，他不得救，在天国遇得到啊。
You have to be very careful and remember that
一定遇得到啊。
that one day you will meet that member again in heaven.
感谢神，我们太平洋教会实在是很太平。
But thank God, the Pacifica Church is
所以我每
indeed
次
a
来就
very
很高兴啊。
pacifist church, very peaceful church. Every time I come here, I'm very happy.
但是有一些教会，因为信徒不一样，有的是还蛮凶的。
But in some churches, because members come diverse
很
backgrounds,
少了。
so some can be kind of fierce, but not many.
有的凶到传道都怕。
Some are so fierce
气势凌人了。
that the preachers are scared of them.
真的，但是我有时候是不是也太凶了？
But I don't know if sometimes I myself am quite fierce.
那我自己要检讨自己。
So I have to self-examine myself.
修度也丢，以后会遇到了天国遇到的时候，对不对？
So we have to remember that one day we shall meet again in heaven. Noah.
如果有人欺负你就想没有关系，以后天国遇到你再告诉他说，跟天父说，阿爸天父啊，他在世上都欺负我。
So Noah, it's okay if someone bullies
遇
you.
得到的。
You'll meet them again in heaven, and then you can complain to your heavenly Father and tell him that this person bullied me whilst on earth.
所以得救的基督徒，
So Christians who have been saved,
到最后会归一处的。
in the end, they will gather at one place.
每个人都从一个天国了，没有说有钱人去有钱天国，那个穷人那个拉撒路去拉撒路天国都是苍蝇一堆，然后那个深仓的没有。
So everyone would go to the same heaven. There's no heaven for the rich or the heaven for the poor, where Lazarus would end up with all the sores and the flies.
在世上，你再高贵的人呢，有人真的长来就是很高贵啊。
So whilst on earth, you may be born like a royalty,
你到天国一样啊。
but when you end up in heaven, you'll all be the same.
所以你不能看清弟兄姐妹啊。
So
好臭啊！你去天国跟他一起啊，他臭到你了，你说哦，他去天国我不去了，好，那就下地狱了。
So you can never say that, oh, I'm so high and mighty, this member is so smelly, you go to heaven, then I don't want to go to heaven with you. Then where would you end up? Do you want to end up in hell?
好，那 这个创世纪个人的这些路，其实是我们都会遇到的。
So these personal roads that is carved out in the book of Genesis is the paths that we may also walk on.
我们个人真的也有是个人的路。
So each of us personally will have a road to travel on.
你的个人路跟你的个性有关系。
And the road that you would personally walk on is very directly related to your personality.
你可以自己回想一下，你人生到现在，你怎么样的个性的时候会走怎么样的路？
And if you try to
你自
look,
己想一想，我自己也一样嘛。
so if you try to reflect back on your past, including myself, you would find that at what stage and what kind of personality you have would lead you to what kind of road.
你可能一开始你的路像亚伯拉罕，
Perhaps in the beginning, your road, the road you travel on may be like that of Abraham's.
亚伯拉罕是向前的，
Abraham is one who goes forward.
刚开始是有点自私的。
So he started off perhaps a little bit selfish.
他下埃及啊，不管太太这种人，我常讲这种人不嫁他也可以。
He did not care for his
对不对？
wife. He chose to go to Egypt all by himself and did not think for his wife. So I always say that sometimes it's better not to marry a man like Abraham.
但是他有改进就可以嫁了。
But because Abraham improved himself, so you can marry him.
为了自己的小命可以牺牲太太。
So he's a person who is able to sacrifice his wife in order to save his own life.
所以要不然路是蛮长的，他
So-
在路上面学习啊。
So Abraham's road is quite long, and he learned a lot through the road.
以撒呢，
How about Isaac?
他是顺服的。
He is very submissive.
我们也讲他人生，圣经里面只有26章是他的故事啊，讲最少。你要讲那个以撒的故事，实在是一章就完了。
So Isaac's story recorded in the Bible is very short. It only takes up one chapter.
他是生也是人家说时候到了生，结婚也说啊你就跟他结婚，然后呢，人家说要把你杀，你就给人家杀，很顺服，
So-
顺服才会怎么样舒服。
So because Isaac's life is Isaac was very submissive. So because he's submissive, his life is very smooth. Because even when he was born, it was a time determined by God. And when it's time for him to get married, as well as for him to be offered, everything had a time, and he just submitted.
顺服就没有什么故事可以讲了。
So if you are submissive, then you will not have too many stories to tell.
他活得很长啊，但是就一章而已，短短的
So-
讲完了。
He lived a long life, but his story was only recorded in one short chapter.
那你会感觉说，哎呀，太无聊了嘛，我是向前冲的，那你就冲咯。
So perhaps you may say, oh, that is a boring life, so I'd rather to dash ahead, so go ahead, just dash ahead.
接下来你就当那个什么雅各啦，你就一条虫了。
Then it would lead you to a road like that of Jacob's and become like a worm.
他受的苦也够多了，
Jacob underwent a lot of suffering,
他的人生也够精彩了，
and his life was very colorful.
并且也很怎么样，很现代人说要卓越嘛 ，excellent， 对不对？
Today we're encouraged to pursue an excellent life.
要创新嘛，跟人家不一样啊，那就雅各了。
So we have to be creative and different from others.
那到时候你会瘸腿就是。
But in the end, you may find yourself being lame or a limp.
到你瘸腿了，你这个时候你才学会了。
And only when you start limping, then you have learned your lesson.
所以每个人跟真的神配合他们的个性，让他走这样的路。
So indeed, God would match your personality to the road that you would travel on.
所以有时候你说我人生怎么坎坷？那如果你是得救的人你自己要想说感谢神，我就是要走坎坷路，因为我这个性是这样。你要先把个性修好，路才平啊。
So if you claim that, oh, why is my life so difficult and so tough? Then if you are a saved person, then you should say thank God and that you are walking on this road because of your personality. And if you change your personality, then your road will be straightened.
我们受洗都是在主里啊，
Because after baptism, we are all baptized into the Lord.
赞美诗我们很熟啊，我们是什么？因为走在主路上是什么？那是好路啊！你其实人生每个人的路都是走在主的路，主的路不会坎坷的。坎坷是什么？你车子4轮1轮爆胎了，当然开起来，你说哎，这个路怎么那么糟？其实你是坏车啊。
So, like the hymn says, walking in the King's Highway. So the King's Highway is a very nice road to travel on if you are saved. But imagine if your car, the 4 wheels, one of the wheel is punctured, then you would surely have a bumpy road ahead of you.
有一句话说，不会开船，你嫌那个河啊太窄，你不会开船呢、那你感觉太平洋怎么这么小？
Okay, so there's a saying which goes that if you don't know how to control or steer your boat, then you would complain that why is the river so small? So even the Pacific Ocean would be too small for you if you do not know how to steer the boat.
神的路都是平安的路啊！
So the way of God is always a peaceful way.
你走在神的路上，你感觉坎坷，要反省。
And if you are traveling on God's highway and yet you find it very tough, then you should examine yourselves.
这是每个人个别的路。
Because and each of us have to travel on our own paths or own road.
那接着下来呢，
And next,
有一个共同的路，
we will walk on a common road,
这就是选民的路，
which is the
旷
road,
野路。
which is the desert road, which is the road of the chosen ones.
那这条路是一个集体的，每个人都要走的。
And this road is a collective one. Everyone has to travel on this road.
你离开了这条旷野路，你就不是属于这个选民的这个团体了，
And
你
if
也可
you
能就完蛋了。
and if you if you go astray from this desert road, then you are no longer among the saved ones.
哎，我们来看出埃及记，
Now let's turn to the book of Exodus.
出埃及记第5章
Exodus chapter 5,
第1节，
verse 1. Exodus 5, verse 1. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness."
这是最原始的，
So this is the most original.
容百姓出去
Let my people go
服侍神，
to serve God
在向神守节，
and to hold a feast to God.
在哪里？
Where?
在旷野。
In the wilderness.
所以这条路是一个选民集体的这个神训练的路。
So this is a collective road where God would train his chosen people.
第3节哈，
Verse 3.
他们2个又讲了啦，
So both of them said again,
说希伯来人的神遇见了我们，求你容我们往旷野去。
"The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please, let us go 3 days' journey into the desert
走3天的路程，祭祀主我们的神啊。
and sacrifice to the Lord our God."
这样的一个句子一直在重复。
So such phrase is always been repeated.
比如说
For
7章
example,
16节
we can see that repetition in Exodus chapter 7.
好，也是一样的，说要去旷野侍奉神了哈。
It again said that they would go to the desert Exodus 7 verse 16. Again they said, "Let my people go that they may serve me in the wilderness."
8章27节、
And chapter 8 verse 27,
28节，
verse 28.
我们再看13章
And now let's read Exodus 13
18节。
verse 18.
现在就真的要走这条路了，
So now is the time that they have to travel on this road,
旷野路。
which is the desert road.
13章第18节，
Exodus 13 verse 18. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, And the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt.
其实出埃及不一定要走旷野路啦。
In reality, to get out of Egypt, they do not necessarily have to go through the wilderness.
现在人，如果你从埃及要去迦南地去以色列，如果你走以色列人他们走的这个路，人家除非你是观光客了，如果你是正常人，人家说你头脑有问题，头脑坏掉。
So today, if you are planning to travel from Egypt to Israel, and then you try to go through this wilderness way, unless you're a tourist, then people would think that you are a lunatic.
短路了，头脑短路，秀逗。
Yeah, your brain has a short circuit.
我们来看那个生命记哈。
Now let's turn to Deuteronomy.
我们看生命记。
Let's turn to Deuteronomy.
在生命记里面，特别的记载了旷野路的情况。
In the book of Deuteronomy, it especially describes the road of the desert road.
我们先来看那个神对那个埃及人的对待。
Let's first look at how God treated the Egyptians.
我们看6章第22节。
Let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 22. Verse 22, and the Lord showed signs and wonders before our eyes, great and severe against Egypt, Pharaoh and all his household.
好，神是那个施神迹，对不对？
So God showed signs
那用什么来形容啊？
and wonders. So how
大
was it?
又是什么？
Oh, how was the signs described? Great and severe.
哎，大而可畏。
Great and severe.
好，那我们再来看第8章。
Now let's read Deuteronomy chapter 8.
8章15节。
Chapter 8, verse 15. Who led you through that great and terrible wilderness in which were fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock.
好，这里的旷野它用什么形容词怎么来形容？
So in this verse, how do they describe the wilderness? It's great and terrible.
刚刚呢，
How about early on?
那个神迹神给
Great and severe.
severe，哪个比较严重啊？
So which ones are more serious?
哪个？
Great and severe, great and terrible?
差不多还是
About the same or? 都一样啊，
都一样哈，
都很恐怖。
都很恐怖，哪个比较恐怖
They
一
are
点
very scary. Which is more scary?
啊？啊？哦，这是，他说中文是说大而可怕的那个什么旷野。
So in Chinese, it says here, the same in English, it's a great and terrible wilderness.
那神在埃及下的那个神迹啊，你看10大神迹到最后是家家哭嚎啊，死人呢、最后是每个人遇到都可以讲人家你家死人啊。
So the plagues that God put in the land of Egypt ended with the death of every child the firstborn in every household.
可怕不可怕？很可怕
Isn't that dreadful and severe? Yes, scary.
埃及人家是家家死人，大而可畏。
So in every
神的
Egypt,
神迹啊，
so in every Egyptian household, great and severe acts of God can be seen.
你们出埃及进到旷野也是怎么样？大而可怕。
But when they come out of Egypt into the wilderness, what happened? It's also a great and terrible wilderness.
这条路是神带领他们的。
And this path or this road is a road that God was leading them on.
这条路你走过之后，
And after you have tread or walked on this road,
你想这是什么路啊？
then can you imagine what kind of road this is?
你可以有很多的心得哈。
You
你
will-
想一想，因为星期五还有嘛，对不对？
You-
谷子是鸟，我们还会遇到嘛，对不对？
So you can take some time to think about this because I'll share this message again on Friday night, and I believe I will see you again, Sister Ku.
我们来看那个启示录
Now let's read, turn to the book of Revelation,
12章，
chapter 12.
这我们以前有讲过哈。
We have talked about this in the past,
第1节、第2节，
verse 1 and 2.
这是讲这个妇人啊，
So this two verses talked about the woman.
这个妇人有够尊贵啊，
This woman is very royal
有够高大，
and huge.
你看身披是日头嘛，对不对？
She was clothed with the sun,
脚踏月亮，
with the moon under her feet.
天跟月，然后呢，头戴色星的冠冕哦，
So she has the sun and the moon, and on her head a garland of 12 stars.
日月星都来了。
So everything is with her, the sun, the moon, and the stars.
他实在是再看下去，实在不忍心听啊。
If you continue on, you really do not have the heart to go on.
生产这个艰难中，疼痛呼叫。
She cried out in labor and in pain to give birth.
好，他去哪里了？
And where did she go?
这个是末世的真教会嘛？
So this talks about the true church in the end time,
就是我们真耶稣教会了。
which is the true Jesus church.
看第12章第6节，
Let's read chapter 12, verse 6. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days.
末世真教会
So the true church in the end time
要逃啊，自己跑去哪里？
Will
跑去
have-
旷野啊！
will have to flee. To flee where? To the wilderness.
那里是神给他们预备的
So
地方。
the wilderness is a place that God has prepared for them.
那这个我们都讲过哈。那我们再看14节，
We have talked about this before. Now let's jump to verse 14.
时间又更短了。
And time has been shortened.
现在变成一时、多时、半时了。
So it becomes time and times and half a time.
在这个时候呢，
And at this time,
第14节，
verse 14, but the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent.
不是神给你预备地方了，
But it's not that the Lord prepares for you a place.
神给你预备的地方要变成你的地方。
So the place that God has prepared for you shall turn into your own place.
这不一样的哦。
So this is different.
小孩子常常回家也不打扫也不什么，他说这是妈妈应做的妈妈家。
So young kids, when they return home, they do not clean up the house or do housework because they claim that this is mom's house.
有一天
But one day,
妈妈把这个房子给你了，
and if mother leaves this house to you,
你回家说啊，这我的家，你就打扫起来了。
then you return home and you say, oh, this is my house. So you will start to clean the house yourselves.
所以旷野
So the same with the wilderness
是神预备的，
is a place prepared by God.
旷野
The wilderness
是你的路，
will be your road,
是我们的路。
will be our road.
那我们会从现在开始哈，我们会用选民在那个旷野的走路，我们来看这条路是怎么样走的。
So afterwards, we shall study how the chosen people walked in this wilderness road.
这查经嘛，对不对哈？
Since it's a Bible study,
那古之师娘给你一个功课，
so I'll give Sister Ku a homework.
那个民数记33章。
Numbers chapter 33.
其实我本来是今天晚上要讲的，但是没有关系，星期五再来。
Initially, I wanted to share Numbers 33 tonight, but I'll share it with you on Friday.
这就是迢迢旷野路的一站一站又一站。
So this is here. It covers the different stops in the desert road.
你看第5节哈，
In verse 5,
33章5节，
Numbers 33, verse 5.
以色列人从南塞起行，
33, sorry, verse 5. The children of Israel moved from Ramesses
然后呢，哈拿在那个什么苏哥，
and camped at Sukkoth.
看嘛
啊，
中文是安营啊。
And camped.
哦 camp 对对对
Yeah.，
但是这个 camp 就是哈拿，
Oh,
就是哈拿。
camped is
希伯来如果是
the Hebrew word is Hannah.
哈拿就是 grace 嘛，或是那个
Hannah means
安
grace.
营就是安息。 是不是有关系？我就不知道，要问你爸爸，你爸爸叫希伯来文，但是都是哈娜，就是。
So to camp, the Hebrew word for camping is Hannah.
好，那古子新娘的那个功课就是从起行到安营几次了。
So Sister Ku's homework is from the time they move until they camp. How many times? How many times it happened?
你看5节是起行安营，对吧？6节也是从苏哥起行安营，对不对？
So verse 5 they moved and camped. Verse 6 also they moved from Sukkoth and started and camped again.
他们走过几站？
So how many stops did they go through in this
你
road?
认识几站？
How many stops did you recognize?
在这几站发生什么事情？
And in these different stops, what happened?
那这就我们星期五再来哈。
Wow. So this is coming soon on Friday.
那我们再来唱诗
Let's sing hymn
478首。
478.